Hello, hello. This is Lyndall Descant. And welcome to Music as a Metaphor. Today we are creeping into fall. It's officially fall, actually. And it officially feels like fall where I'm at. So things are moving fast. We're in an interesting time period. And today there's a subject that I love to talk about that I'd like to get into. And it is the right and the left brain. That connection, how we can use music to foster some of those connections, what it really means for us, and how we can use that mindset on the larger stage of our lives. So music as a metaphor, we'll talk a little bit about that creative mindset and how it can benefit you in your whole life, not just in creating music. And outside of that, last week I really didn't get to talk about the Diddy situation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because for me as a musician, this is, I believe, a profound opportunity for DIY musicians to step up. Something that I've been doing, encouraging a lot on this show. So I want to talk a little bit about the P-Dits. And outside of that, I've been going back and listening to my episodes. I believe I just posted episode 19. On my YouTube. I've been doing that every Tuesday. And as I do, there's oftentimes little subjects that I hint at or I don't quite get into. So I'm not going to say much more about what I plan to get in today because oftentimes I'm improvising like I love to do, as I'm an improvisateur. I'm somebody who came to music because I love improvisation. So this talk will be a bit of an improvisation as well, and I don't want to mention too many other things because we'll see where the Spirit takes us. But that being said, I do just want to send out, before we start today, just a prayer of love and solace for everyone out there. At the time when you hear it, it's the perfect time for you to get this note of joy and peace for your heart, that you truly deserve it. That maybe there is a path of suffering that you're on, but it's not in vain. It is not in vain, my friend, and you are not alone. So I want to send out just a note of encouragement and compassion for anybody who's listening out there, that wherever you are in your life, that this message today will be empowering for you and your path so that you are able to bring your unique gifts into this crazy arena that we're in right now. And if singing is that, I sure hope that you feel that way and that you can't keep from singing, that you can't keep your gifts from this world, because we certainly need each other in this time more than ever. So yes, on that note, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk a little bit. Actually, I kind of want to talk about P. Diddy first. So, P-Dits, the didders, the didgeridoo. I'll be honest with you, I have never really been into hip-hop. So I can't say that I've ever been a fan of P. Diddy or J-Lo or Bieber or any of that whole cast of characters that are being, implemented. No, that's not the right. Implicated. I think that's the right word in this scenario. And if you haven't heard, I know I'm so proud. I've talked to some people a few people who have no idea what's going on in mainstream. And I'm going to say bravo to you, because I think that's rather smart in today's time period to be shielding yourself from this 24-hour news cycle and all the things going on. But I will say that the big news, just to sum it up very quickly for anybody who hasn't heard, is that P. Diddy was a very, very influential rapper. When he came on the scene, he was called a rapper. We used to call it rappers back in the day, but now it's really just all under the title of hip hop. And he was one of those guys that wasn't just, an artist in his own right, but he, he became a producer and he began to set the stage for who was relevant as an artist. And so he brought a lot of other artists through his companies, through his support, through his endorsement. Okay. And this, I know by like 2004, he was already a pretty big guy, on the scene. I remember always knowing his name, right? He was famous. And you've probably heard of him too. I think his official name is Puff Daddy, which becomes relevant because it was always right in front of our face, that this guy preferred men, nothing wrong with that. But in particular in the hip hop culture and in that world, that's still sort of a stigmatism. It's still sort of frowned upon. And it's also kind of like, why keep it hidden? Back in the early 2000s, I could understand why. But now that it's a whole, nowadays you actually can be much more successful in the music industry, much more supported if you are out as preferring same sex, your sexual preference. In the last like 5-6 years, that has shifted where you have a genuine advantage. So why wouldn't you come out if that's the case? And P. Diddy was, I guess, that was always his preference, but it was right in front of our face because his name was P. Diddy, which Puff in the English vernacular means homosexual in a derogatory way. But, a lot of rap is using those words and slinging them and being wordsmiths in different ways. And so apparently, not my opinion, because I really don't even know his music. A lot of people say he was never that talented. He was a backup dancer for, I want to say Tupac, but it might not have been him. So I'm murdering this a little bit. And if you really want to know about this subject, tune into somebody like Mark Devlin. There's these, researchers that I'm sure going very into depth. I've heard Ian Carroll. I think I posted something about Ian Carroll. He does a good job just diving into subjects in general, and he's been covering a little bit of some of this background. But it sounds like Puff Diddy got promoted not because he was so talented, but because he was willing to make some deals with some people. There's this all allegedly, but he's recently been, there's been these indictments against him and he's been taken into custody, basically because there's some pretty big allegations against him as far as being an Epstein and having these freak off parties where he would invite all these industry people, but he had cameras in every room. He would drug them, I think unbeknownst to them and knownst to them. And they would be in compromising positions, and then he would sort of have them under his thumb. In some cases, it's looking very bad that some of these people were underage at the time when he was doing some of this stuff and signing them on as artist. And you could also infer from that, and I will infer from that meant that there might have been musicians that were very talented that were not allowed to progress or were not brought to the forefront because they were not willing or were unable to be compromised in that way. So it wasn't just about these cats being talented, which I'm sure they were, but that they were able to be compromised and controlled. And so from there on out, whatever their message is, they're not completely free to express themselves. And that's the bubble that's being burst. That's why I'm enjoying this. It's not that people, like myself and people who are in the music industry didn't know about this. It's very much like Weinstein when that came out, that everybody knew. It's just it wasn't out and it wasn't confronted. And it was just modus operandi. It's just the way that the industry worked. If you were able to be compromised and control, then doors would be opened for you. I heard an insider a while back who talked about this. She had written a very successful screenplay. That screenplay did get her in the door, but then there was these weird steps she was being asked to take, and she had these opportunities on the table that were pretty big. But as these deals are sort of being, worked out, it's like, well, can you please give us these sort of boudoir photos? We need boudoir photos of you. It's like, well, why do I need boudoir photos? I'm a screenwriter. And so by turning that down, suddenly within a week, the deal fell through. It's that type of thing. It's a loose association. So it's always speculation in a way. When you're an outsider, if you really weren't at these Diddy parties or whatever, you're just speculating, or you're noticing from much lower levels than all the way up at Diddy that it's very much, will you jump through these hoops, whatever these hoops are, and they start sort of innocent, and then maybe they get progressively more compromising as you're saying yes to jumping through these hoops. And if you're saying no, guess what? You don't go further. right? So this is the bubble that's being burst on a mainstream level, in my opinion, in the collective consciousness, is that idea that it's just the cream of the crop, the most talented that rise to the top. And if you don't, then just give up on it. You're not that good. Okay, this is the gaslighting that so many friends and family have done, albeit innocently, to their loved ones who were maybe hopeful and talented in a musical instrument or in an art. And it's horrible. And I hope that they're able to recognize that they were wrong about that, and able to give their friends and family that maybe didn't make it into these inner circles, give them more respect than that, because in reality, their character deserves respect. And it has been, I'm ranting here, but it has been such a difficult position to be in when you actually do hold the line and you actually do keep your integrity and you actually do see a value for art and music that isn't being compromised and isn't being controlled and isn't being sort of propagandized for certain messages. You decided to go your own way, and in that you didn't find like a huge level of success. You weren't accepted into these inner circles, and then on top of that, your friends and family turn on you and disrespect you whilst respecting these people that you know to be absolutely disgusting human beings. That has been such a gaslighting thing that we've done to people who have been, you know, trying to maintain the purity of music. And I just want to say, like, I hope that's shifting. And I want to say that I hope that by the collective recognizing that, oh, maybe it's not as simple as just the best musicians make it to the top. I hope that people who call themselves Christians but have been going to Lady Gaga concerts, I hope that they can start to wake up at this point. I hope that this P. Diddy bubble, because it's so far reaching, because there's so many people involved with it, both in Hollywood and in the music industry, and because it just exposes the industry itself for the corruption, I hope that many people can just sort of be like, oops, whoops, we got that wrong, right? And maybe they can start to turn and look at the people in their lives that are still playing music, the local musicians that are still out playing, the young people that just love music and just play it. I hope that they can recognize that those people deserve respect. Maybe those people will never be able to make the money that P. Diddy made, although that's a side note as well, because was he ever really making money on his music, or was it always sort of this side hustle? And we'll talk a little bit about some of that. But you know, people who are willing to just continue to keep the music going no matter what, I hope at least their friends and family can show them a level of love and support and respect. I can say that in my own world, it hasn't been an outward disrespect. I think in many ways, by the time I was doing music, I lost a lot of people's, you know, good opinion just because I was sort of out of the matrix and wasn't subscribing to a lot of things. And so, you know, from that level, I don't know if I can really expect many people to understand the choices I've made, but maybe on a certain level, they can understand that I was making decisions not from a place of just wanting to be J-Lo someday, you know, which is what everybody assumes when you want to keep doing music, but was coming from an entirely different perspective altogether, because I truly believe in the power of music, and I truly hate that it's been so corrupted. I think it's so unfair and so terrible that music is being weaponized and used against people. And it felt like even if I was doing this very small impact on just trying to teach children the power of music, the joy of music, trying to give them the gift of music for their life, trying to instill that in any adult brave enough to even face their programming, that it's, you know, not worth their time, and leave music to, you know, this elitism in the music that I've spoken about. Just leave it to the beautiful people, leave it to the talented people like P. Diddy. You know, they're the ones who should be playing music. No, all of that has been so backwards and so wrong. And I'm hoping that this is coming to the collective, and that many people will start to pick up their instruments, because where do you turn? So many people get disillusioned to music altogether at this point, because even though this is hitting the mainstream, this is not Many, many people have been clued into this for many years, okay? Not the least of which has been the QAnon people, which whatever you think of them, they're not entirely crazy and they're not entirely wrong, okay? I can't say what level of percentage, but they've been clued into some stuff that the collective has not been ready for, and they have been unrelenting in their research on it, okay? And so if you even bothered to listen to one of your relatives that was QAnon, if you even bothered to give them the benefit of the doubt, you would have recognized that they were clued into stuff. Or maybe what about in 2016, the people who actually did pay attention to the WikiLeaks stuff, and they didn't just listen to the news when they said, don't read this, it's dangerous, okay? That was the point where I lost a lot of friends in Brooklyn, because it was the groupthink was coming online, and I wasn't allowed to just research things on my own and look into it myself. And I wasn't allowed. And if you were, then you could see behind the scenes a long time ago, and this information isn't new to you. But what is new is seeing it sort of hit the mainstream, okay? Epstein hit the mainstream. Now P. Diddy's hitting the mainstream. People are starting to recognize that there is this sort of blackmailing and this sort of corruption behind many institutions that they've very naively believed at worst are just incompetent. Right. And so with that hitting the mainstream, I want to bring the focus back around to the little guys, the DIYs, you know, what I call the David Army Band, the people who have been continuing the music because they believed in it, and it was never for their own glory. It was to the detriment of their lives. You know, how many people even aren't considered, you know, they were considered that they just weren't growing up, right? Because they wanted to keep doing music. Right? They just weren't growing up. You know, how many times were they hurled those type of insults and bad opinions at them? And, you know, it doesn't matter because it was never about that anyways, but maybe, just maybe, they can start to receive a little bit more love and respect from their circle of friends, the people who are starting to listen to this stuff and recognize that, hey, maybe they were just clued into a different place than I was at the time, and there's nothing wrong with that, but now I can turn to them and offer a little bit more, you know, love and support to them. And, you know, that being said, I just want to say, oh, there was something I was wanting to back up. Sorry if I sound a little bitter about this. You know, I need to release this because the truth is, and I've said this before, it doesn't matter when you clue into it, it just matters that you clue into it, because we're all on the same page. Sorry, I'm getting some messages here. It's a busy day. It doesn't, oh, I know what I'm saying. But that being said, it also doesn't matter in a way whether or not you get support from your friends and your family or from society at large. Many people feel like they're tuned in to their mission. And that music, keeping the music going was part of their mission. I know many people who feel this way, that it's important because music is under assault. Not only when you really dive into the research of the music industry, it used to be more free and it's sort of slowly been way more infiltrated. There was always a level of propaganda in art, you know, when you go back to all of the different systems of the world, back to communism and back to like Russia being taken over by the Bolsheviks. They've always known that they could use culture and music and these things to affect hearts and minds a certain direction. But there used to be way more of like a wild card to it. You know, there used to be way more of like you could sort of be in there and be in the mix and get a certain level of you know, support and have a certain level of career with that. Have a certain level in your community, and that all really, in my opinion, really started getting squeezed out in the 90s when a lot of things started taking a turn. And then with digitization and just where we've been, it's been very hard to keep the music going from a pure standpoint. And then COVID was almost the death nail of it, right? Because they were literally coming out and saying like singing was going to kill people. And it's the live music scene has not come back from that. And that's what I want to be honest with that, because something I'm noticing is this gaslighting happening with people being like, oh, we're back to normal and everything's fine, that the economy's not that bad, and people want to live in that space of denial. and they want to keep their illusions, but it's just not true. And last week I was so surprised to find out that one of my favorite venues, Rockwood Music Hall, is still just limping along. And I guess I knew they weren't doing good because I had heard of a fundraiser not too long ago, but to see it for myself, because I haven't really been there and I was just there last week, to see it for myself and really see where it is, the music industry is not back. It just is not back. And Taylor Swift is not the music industry. And she had, allegedly, I would not put my faith in her. Okay, there's a lot of, when you go into the research of who she is and where she comes from and how she got to be where she's at and the things that she's pushing and the things that happen at her concerts, all that stuff, I would not say that she deserves to hold the industry the way that people do. She does not deserve that. And if that's still where you want to be and you think I'm just a bitter musician, no problem, because very long ago I lost the need for a good opinion of others. I'm going to do what I think is right for the collective and for music, regardless of how popular it is. But the music industry is struggling. Music itself is struggling. And as that happens, it's like many things that have happened. Like, this is one example of things that have happened since COVID. Many of the hotels in New York were really struggling with, people not staying there, right? And they were really on the brink of about to have to close their doors. And then the government came in and said, well, hey, we'll pay you a certain amount of money if you'll house migrants. So they became migrant hotels. So those hotels are still open, but the entire basis of which they are operating is different. And I would say the same thing is true with music, and getting funded and being supported. So, the local guys, the ability to just sort of make music is still continuing to be so difficult. Bringing people together, having musicians show up, having music teachers show up. I spoke with a hotel, a little family run inn that's been open for 150 years, and they had 2 restaurants in this very small town, and they had to close one of them, not because they weren't getting enough customers. There were customers, but the problem was there weren't workers. The workers weren't showing up, right? And I think that's happening a lot too with the musicians and the music teachers. It's just everything's becoming so much more unreliable, and I really don't understand why that's happening. My brain cannot wrap around it. But I will say that to me, it becomes more important than ever to be creating music in your house, to be going out to your local cafe and playing music, to be writing your songs and putting those out on the internet. In particular, when it's been at some point divorced from your ego, and it's not about your own glory or making money or being famous or any of these things that allow these people to be compromised. Whatever you want to say about them, whether they're young, whether they're victims, a lot of people are, really compassionate about Bieber and Justin Bieber, and I understand why. If you see some of these videos of him being a little boy, being a young teenager and being pulled into that world, who wouldn't get tempted by all that? I get that. But in reality, what tempts them is not about the goodness of the music, right? It's not about serving the community at that point. It's not a selfless thing at that point, right? It is our own selfishness, our own egos that need to be divorced from the music. And I'll just say this, I talked about on episode 19, these dimensions and this, bringing in the idea of, the heavens, like splitting the dimensions and the ideas of the heaven, and they're sort of being like, we're in the 3rd dimension is the earth, or the 1st heaven. The 2nd heaven is what the New Agers would call the 4th dimension, and it's where really Satan reigns, and it's where these sort of creatures reign. And I'm speaking all of this stuff metaphorically and symbolically because I don't know the truth of all of it, but like I said, I think truth is truth, and you can hear this stuff talked about in a lot of different cultures and time periods and literature. It's talked about over and over and over again, and I personally believe there's some truth to it. And I think we're in a zone where that 4th dimension is being revealed to us. Like the veil between the 3rd and the 4th that was intact when I was young has been ripped apart. And some people would say it's because of the time period we're in, like the ancients, like the Mayan kind of thing, like in 2012, it was just destined to be this time period. Other people would say it's been more all these rituals and CERN and using these atomic bombs and sort of messing with the nature of things. Others would say that the Nazis really started in earnest in 1940, like trying to get us to this place, using these beings the way they did in the days of old, trying to align themselves with these little g gods and Satan and his Nephilim and these fallen beings, and trying to get using their influence to rule over us in this world. And that's what people would also say about these stars, is that they sort of sell their souls. They, you know, it's not an altruistic place to which they come to make these deals with somebody like Diddy. And then when they sell their souls over time, they lose their souls and they become empty vessels, and they get replaced with these beings that want to get into this world, into the third heaven, or the first heaven, third dimension, from the second dimension, or the second heaven, fourth dimension. And then the third dimension, I'm sorry, not the, I'm sorry, I'm so mixing this up. The fifth dimension, what the New Agers call the fifth dimension, or the third heaven, what theologists call the third heaven, that's really the place where most of us want to get back to. But in order to get back to that, you do have to be willing to, you know, suffer and get past your own ego and become altruistic in service to self, because it's a higher vibration. And all of this other stuff can really lower your vibration, right? These beings in the fourth dimension or the second heaven, they really want to get us in fear. They want to keep us in fear because we're enslaved that way. Whereas when we lighten our vibration, we can return to an open heaven. And open heaven is where the blessings are. It's where we're, you know, it's our true nature. It's where nobody's suffering. There's no evil. It's where God's true nature can be revealed to us. And somehow we fell from that, and our work is to try to get back to that, whilst having to deal with all of this entrapment, all of these lies. And I bring that up because I heard something right before I came on today that I think is interesting, that I've heard this in several places, that, you know, Satan, or the enemy, who is supposedly really ruling over us at this point, which is why we have to work so hard to get out from underneath the programming and his control, and why we can feel so alone in that pursuit, because our friends and family and our culture all fall into it. He was a musician. He was an archangel that was over music. And that he has, you know, taken music from us and turned it against us. And also, I speak a lot about this, he has convinced us there's no power to it. He's talked us out of its power. And when we begin to realign with God and heaven again, we start to be shown the power of this music. And supposedly the notes, the 7 notes, open different doors to heaven. And I've talked about this, that music is a portal, and that these occultists and these dark people understand this, and they use it against us in these ritualistic concerts that Christians go to, thinking it's just art. But it's not. And when you really understand and study this stuff, you recognize that the same symbols over and over and over again show up in these music giants, you know, these guys that we are worshiping when we go to these things, and we make them like they're just so talented and they're so great. And so in reality, you're once again nothing new under the sun. You're worshiping symbols that you don't want to be worshiping. And by taking back the power of music, you, number one, recognize that it's powerful. And then number two, you start to learn the art of, you know, opening and using music, these 7 keys of music, for the good, for the collective good, and for, you know, bringing heaven to earth, and for bringing God into people's lives so that they don't suffer anymore, so that the human trafficking ends, you know, so that people's eyes are opened and they reclaim their power and recognize that it's been us giving over our power, us, you know, being bamboozled by this stuff, by these lies. And, you know, P. Diddy crashing and burning is one of those lies that people are becoming aware of. And so this is the direction we want to head. And And then I heard something like the 12 tones, so there's 7 keys in a scale, in a major scale, and then there's 12 unique keys. And the 12 corresponds to rightful government, which I think many of us would love to return to a more benevolent government, a government that you really only read about with somebody like David or Solomon. We don't have a lot of examples of a time when a government actually cared for its people. And many people are living in the illusion of that, and I get why they want to be there. But in order to truly get there, we have to be willing to go through the suffering of facing the lies that we've been living under. And so music is a tool to get there. And David's Army Band, the concept that a call to people who are willing to do that work. And if you are willing to do that work, if you actually understand, and you're still even listening to me right now, you are needed. You are needed to step up and listen to your call as a musician, to reclaim music, to use it for the collective good, to bring blessings upon this earth. And it is way more powerful than you think. And it doesn't matter if you don't have Diddy's clout. It doesn't even matter if you don't have 10,000 people on YouTube, because the truth is it's very hard to tell what's real or not on YouTube with your reach. It's just about sitting in your own home and doing this work and allowing those doors and those opportunities to open for you. And when they do, you step into it. And I will warn you, it probably never seems as glamorous as you think, because we've been so taught this game of lies about what that really looks like. And so you have to be willing to throw out every expectation as well. And so, yeah, that's what I want to say. That was my full thoughts on that. And thank you for listening on that, because I think something in me is telling me there's an opportunity right now for musicians to step up who have their hearts aligned in the right place. And I'm thankful to all of the researchers and the people that have been exposing the lies. There's many, many out there. It's really not my talent. And so I'm just able to sort of summarize the situation for you here. But if you're interested at all, please go look for yourself. There's so many great researchers out there, but they might not be in your algorithm. Twitter is a place right now for the moment. I believe TikTok is too, where the stuff is, out there, and they will bring the receipts. They will show you the receipts of exactly what's happening. So it's really not something that I want to debate with you. It's more something for you to go and research on your own and find your own answers, and then maybe come back to me and say, hey, I did that, and I think this and this, because yeah, I think I'll stop there with that subject and move on to something else. Taking a deep breath here, because for some reason I've been having a lot of anxiety in the last 5 days. Not exactly sure where it's coming from. Sometimes that's a good sign, sometimes it's a bad sign. So I want to switch to a different topic. One of those topics that I've, loved discussing with my students, and it's one of the reasons why I loved teaching music to young people as well as adults, because there's a lot of research to show that music rewires the brain to integrate both halves. What am I talking about? A lot of people know about this, but the truth is that one of the very common theories about how our brain is functioning, and this could be proven wrong someday, but the way that we're thinking about it these days is that the two hemispheres of our brain actually compete with each other in a way for dominance. And typically there's one dominant. And in our time period in particular, it is the left brain. The left brain is the dominant one, and it sort of crowds out the right brain. The theory goes is that each one sort of has much more specific, task that it's good at, and that the left brain. Let me read that from this book. I was just reading about this, but you can read about this in so many different places. But I've talked about this book before, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. I really am enjoying this book. It's taking me a very long time to read because I'm digesting it a lot. So I came across this. He was just talking about it in reference to something else, but I thought he had a great breakdown. So let me use this as our breakdown. A great deal of research has been conducted for decades on what has come to be called the brain dominance theory. The finding basically indicates that each hemisphere of the brain, left and right, tends to specialize in and preside over different functions, processes different kinds of information, deal with different kinds of problems. Okay. Essentially, the left hemisphere is more logical, verbal one, and the right hemisphere is more intuitive and creative. The left deals with words, the right with pictures. The left with parts and specifics, the right with holes and the relationship between the parts. The left deals with analysis, which means to break apart. The right deals with synthesis, which means to put together. The left deals with sequential thinking. The right with simultaneous and holistic thinking. The left is time-bound. The left is time-bound, the right is time-free. Although people use both sides, one side or the other generally tends to be dominant. Okay. Of course, the ideal would be to cultivate and develop the ability to have good crossover between both sides of the brain so that a person could first sense what the situation called for and then use an appropriate tool to deal with it. But people try to stay in the comfort zone of their dominant hemisphere and process everything according to either a right or left brain preference. Okay. We live in a primarily left brain dominant world where words and measurements and logic are enthroned, and the more creative, intuitive, sensing, artistic aspect of our nature is often subordinated. Many of us find it difficult to tap into our right brain capacity. Okay. So yes, I agree with all of that. I absolutely agree with all of that. I will say that it's been one of those annoying aspects of society in general to me that so many things are ruled by the left brain. Why is this? I think in part it is our education system. As I've spoken about before, I've seen it happen over and over again where children are abundantly creative at 3, 4, 5, 6, and then by the time they're 7, you have some that still have maintained a level of creativity and many that don't. And everyone has scaled it back on a certain degree. Why do I know this? Well, because I've worked with children. You know, I've worked with children I started when they were young in early childhood education, and then, sometimes would teach a child for 10 years, right? And in particular, it was always about the music, so I was always very focused on the creativity, and it changed what the child would do and be willing to do and wanted to do and was capable of doing. And so I became very convinced that part of it is the school system and the indoctrination that sort of happens from 5 to 7 in particular. And many times if a child is still creative around 7, they can maintain that, right? It doesn't have to be drowned out by the education system. It's not a foolproof thing, but for many it is, right? Because you sort of have to actively try to do it. Now, you might say, well, if a child is doing music, aren't they more creative? And I would say yes. I would say on a certain level. But you can play music from a much more left brain dominant place. And this, to me, is the notes on the page type of style. And there are some students that, an integrated place would be that they play notes on the page and they also enjoy kind of making up songs, and they also kind of enjoy improvisation, and, it doesn't have to be, and I would even say once they learn a song, they want to continue to play it from a sort of emotionally creative place too, right? That can indicate that the right brain is still engaged. But I see many students where it's like they just want to play it it's a game. They just want to play it exactly like it is on the page. They want to be told exactly what to play. They don't want to play music without being clear that it's right or correct. And that's starting to be that left brain place. And I would also say that a lot of jazz has become, I've spoken about this, really left brain dominant, and not because they're not still connected to the right brain, because there still is a level of improvisation, but the improvisation has become much more predictive, much more planned out, much more about, just becoming so complicated, because there's many people that think that jazz is great because it's so complicated in its harmonies, and that complexion is a reflection of that left brain and its desire to, constantly get into the details of things and get into the analyzation of things. And so jazz has gone that direction a lot. And it's lost touch with the other side that really, the right brain, which I've spoken with, is out of time. It's a lot more about taking risk. It's a lot more about seeing patterns and recognizing patterns. It's a lot more about beauty and feeling and, let me go back to some of the things that it said here and see. With pictures, whereas the left deals with words. Okay, I think that is, that could be an argument for jazz, because a lot of jazz artists don't actually like words, right? They don't really like the lyrics. And I would say that that could be a little bit more of the left brain part of music, is when you're really getting into the words, the lyrics. But not necessarily, okay, the left with parts and specifics, and the right with wholes and relationship between the parts. The analysis is the left, and the right is the synthesis, putting it together. So yeah, the right brain, left brain. I'm going to get out of the jazz. Let me get out of the jazz. Let me lighten up on the jazz for right now. Even though I would say that many, many things in our society have been just so far skewed to the left brain that even though the right brain can be involved with it, it's not to the level of what it would be if we were truly balanced between the two. Okay, that the balance between the two is really what's most interesting. And what does that mean? Well, the right is so much more about mystery and spirit and imagination. It's where we're coming up with new ideas, not just recycling of the old. Imagination is where we get those creative solutions. Imagination is where we are able to up-level ourselves because we imagine things to be different. Whereas the left brain can almost be like a closed loop because everything is measured and compared to what it already knows. So you need that right brain in for expansion. You need to be able to be in touch with your imagination so that you can expand, so that you can have something new. Because the left brain in itself can be like a prison, a closed system. It's designed to do great with the parts, but sometimes it misses the forest for the trees, right? So I want to bring this up because it's one of the reasons why I think many people should get involved with music, even adults, and in particular children, and that the practice isn't just about learning the notes on the page or playing music that's already been written. Or like, for example, if you're learning jazz, you're not just learning what the masters have done before you and doing those things, right? The emphasis is more on a combination of the two. The ability of the left brain to be well developed so that it can deal with the details, but the right brain is there to not only see the whole and the relationship of the whole, but it's able to bring in the newness. And we're in a place where we need some new. Okay, we need real solutions. We need real ideas. And in many ways, the left brain crowds out the divine because it can't understand it. And this is the truth. This is a little quote that I've come up with, is that you can imagine God, but you can't understand him. And that's the difference. You need the right brain to have a relationship with your creator and with the spirit and with the whole, because it helps you to get out of the little I, like everything is about you. Right? Because the logic can stay completely on you. And this is how so many people have blind spots, is they stay in their logic and they think they understand everything. And you can have your own biases in there, your own feedback loops, just the way we now see on computer systems. And you never realize you're wrong. In your mind, you're living in this closed loop where everything is verified and justified. Right? And the only way that you would know that you're not is more of the right brain empathy, recognizing that you're not fitting into the whole, recognizing that you're trying to so somebody comes to you with an opposing opinion, your right brain is going to want to look for the pattern in the integration and expand out, zoom out, and see how maybe both could be possible, right? Because they'll say the ultimate form of logic is a paradox, and it's recognizing that your logic has limits and that you need to be actively seeking those paradoxes, and that the right brain is where it can conceive of a third rail. So, in your own logic, there could be two contradictions there, and it seems like a paradox that both would be true. But the right brain is the place that zooms out and can see how they could both be true. And it might be because your logic was too small, it was too limited. Right? So the right brain is the answer to so many things. That creative mindset is a way to live that you're much more accepting and allowing of everything around you, as opposed to the logic that can get very threatened when something doesn't fit in with what it knows to be true, or when somebody's different, or when somebody has a different opinion from you. Right? The right brain could almost come from a place of like welcoming those things, because it's helping us to continue to zoom out our conception and to truly get to know the truth, to truly get to know God, who surely you could understand, or you could conceive that he's bigger than us, right? That you in yourself are not God. You and your logic are not God. And if you think that, you've probably become a detriment, and you're very dangerous. This is how people justify crusades and killing people and horrific things in the name of God, because their concept of God has been pulled down into their logic, as opposed to trying to expand their mind through their imagination into God. And there's a humbling that has to take place with that. So this is where good music used to come from. To me, somebody like Mozart or some of these greats, part of why they've transcended time is not because the technique was so incredible, though it was. Their left brain was highly, highly developed. And so they were able to deal with the details in an impeccable way. And, the technique and all of that, it was mastered, right? Absolute mastery. But there was another element to it. It was that human condition. It was that human mystery. It was connecting us with something bigger, with the cosmos. It was harmony. Going back to that idea that you are one instrument in a symphony. Well, if you're entirely left brain dominant, you are going to think you are the symphony. You're going to make it all about you and your part, and how your part is the most important part, right? But the right brain can zoom you out and recognize there is a whole beautiful symphony here. And you are one part. You're an important part, but you're only one part. And so let's fit in with the whole. Let's see the whole picture. And my mother growing up, it was very important to her that we develop our right brain. And all of my siblings have a well-developed right brain. And none of us are right brain dominant, I would say, but know when somebody is more right brain dominant. In some cases, they're left-handed because it's the opposite side of the body is controlled. In some cases, they're very bad with time. Those people who just they have no concept of time, and they just live in a world outside of time. Even those people would even have a hard time with the world in general. Maybe they did terrible in school. There's a lot of things. And for those people, they really are discouraged. They receive a lot of negative feedback from that. And they're told that they're not intelligent. But it's a different type of intelligence. And for the people who are lucky with that type of dominance, they've been able to break through. And in some cases, maybe they have a left brain person who works with them, right? And brings in the structure they need and the ability to navigate this very left brain dominant world. But truly, what I think all of us should be striving for is more of a balance between the two. The ability to be completely present with the situation and figure out what's happening. My mother really worked hard with that. She had a lot of different games. She did a lot of things to make make us use our imagination. And our imagination is a muscle that needs to be used. And far too many people don't put a value there. And far too many people think it's only about having a craft like music or art. But like I said, the world we live in, it can be so tricky. You could even learn those crafts and still be very left brain, really come from a left brain approach with those arts. So, what does using your imagination look like? Well, visualization is one of them. You know, they'll talk a lot about very successful people use their imaginations to visualize success. This is a slippery slope into manifesting, which I personally don't advocate if you're out of alignment with God, because you're just going to create problems for yourself and everybody else. So, but if, let's say, you are somebody who has very sincerely been working to realign yourself with God's will, then using visualization techniques is incredibly powerful. I mean, the studies are over and over and over again. That's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is to just, humble yourself to try to understand God's will, or recognize God's will in your life, because many times it is going to come from outside your understanding of a situation. Your logic and your understanding of your own life is going to be limited. And when you're able to engage your imagination in your prayer life, maybe, then you're able to come up with a new perspective on things, right? This is another place that this can really help. Using your right brain can really open you up to new perspectives on life that can make a huge difference. And there's many people who would say that when you see miracles happen in your life, it's more from the fact that you're recognizing there's a bigger perspective going on there. You're seeing the limits of your own logic and your own perspective. And so that's why humility is so important. And humility is part of this process of using your right brain. For both adults and children, playing a musical instrument and doing it in a practice where maybe you are learning notes on page because that is a language, but you're also, taking the risk of writing your own songs, of having a little bit more of skill sets where you're running through and seeing the patterns in music. And this is something that I love to teach a lot. And, using theory in a way where you're seeing the patterning behind, you're seeing the building blocks behind the music, and it makes music much easier. You see the pattern, you take the time to see the patterns in the songs, which can also get into analyzing too. But this is sort of that, conglomeration of the right and the left brain. Improvisation is the biggest thing that I would say. Even sitting down and noodling at the piano. For people, this can be frustrating because they can't remember, right? They can't remember sometimes when they're just sitting down and noodling. And that's fine, because this is as you're developing the left brain in accordance with your right brain in music, you can begin to remember. Your musical memory will develop more, and your ability to see the patterns will develop more. And all of this can be an integrated rewiring of your brain, so that now, even in your life, you're more used to using the left and the right brain whenever you're confronted with issues in your life or problems or anything, right? It's a totally different mindset. It's a creative mindset. And I would argue it's more in line with who you truly are as a person. That it's a more empowered way to live your life, because the possibilities feel endless, and you feel much more hopeful when you're connected to the right brain. It sort of opens you up to the infinity of God at that point, even though you don't understand it. And it infuses your logic, it infuses your intellect with spirit, right? It brings spirit, it breathes life into your logic. So now your logic is a much more inspired type of logic. And I would say many people that, have lived sort of depressed lives, some of that has come from the fact that they've been so left brain dominant, and they just really haven't experienced their right brain, or that imagination, or that ability to infuse their life through spirit, through mystery, through infinite possibility. And they just feel very stuck. And so many people, and I was one of them, you think, oh, I'm just not a creative person. But that's not true. You just haven't used it. You were talked out of using it. You were constantly discouraged from using it, and encouraged to use your dominance. To use your left brain dominance, right? And so that's not true. Your identity as human beings, we are creative beings. That's who we are. And if you're talking yourself out of that, then you are now identifying basically as a robot, and you're diminishing yourself into that robot spot. And so that brings this conversation full circle with AI, which is something that many people are worried about. But AI cannot and will not ever be able to assimilate our creativity. This is our connection to the divine. This is our co-creative ability. This is how the co-creator is in us. That God, if you believe he made us in his image, then we have that ability. And that is what sets us apart. So do not allow yourself to just be talked out of it. And even if you've gone 80 years and you haven't used it, it's not too late for you to start to integrate your creativity. And there's so many ways to do it. Okay. One of the ways you know is when you lose track of time. When you're doing something and you lose track of time, that's your right brain coming online, right? Often there is a sense of lightness and joy. And if you are confused about this, I'm so happy to talk with you about this. DM me for a free consultation, because my music lessons are designed to integrate the right and the left brain, no matter what age you are. Okay, to bring both of them online at the same time. And in particular, I see and I push back on so many different music methods where it's like, learn the left brain first, get good first, then you can be creative. And I absolutely think that's ridiculous. Okay, because I've found when you're learning music, and in general, I will say this about your right brain and your creativity, it's like a faucet, right? And when you first turn it on, it's a drip. And it's maybe a drip every 3 days. But the more that you keep that faucet on through your attention and your use, and you're putting it to use in different activities, which there's so many different ways, it will begin to flow and begin to flow. And then it can be on demand a little bit more, right? It can be at your disposal. And it's always been there for you. Even if your chops were that by piano chops, I mean, or music chops, you played 3 chords, but you from day one were learning how to channel that expression, that emotion. The right brain, I don't think I really emphasize this enough on this. The right brain is connected to your emotions. It's connected to symbols. It's connected to expressing your soul. So if from day one that was part of your music practice, even if it was very simplistic, that's one of the amazing things. It doesn't matter, okay? You have people that have songs that have become world famous with 2 chords on it because there was something there that connected to people, right? And that's what the right brain can do too. It can connect you to people, which is something that we've so been missing. Our imagination, that spirit, that emotion, it flows through us. And that's the human connection to each other, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with your technique at that point. It really doesn't. And so don't get caught up in that idea. If you want to get into this, if you feel a call to this to bring your right brain online, then you can start with music and you can start doing it from day one. And then the beautiful thing is, the better your technique gets, the more tools you have in your tool bag to express yourself, right? And so they can grow together. But what you don't want to do is think, oh, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve that. I'm going to get good at the technique, and then someday I can express myself. Then maybe I'll have something worthy to say. No, it doesn't work that way. And look at that. Don't you find that interesting that so many people have a sense of unworthiness connected to their creativity, which is their true power? So don't let yourself be talked out of that. Every single one of us is a creative being. And just the way every single one of us can sing if we want, it won't happen overnight, but you have to start to use it. You have to start to put it to use. You have to put an attention there, right? Because the world won't do it for you. And, it has to be in many ways something that you seek for yourself or you seek out for your children. So get in touch with me. I love to talk about this. I love to figure out, I could talk about this all day. There's so many more things. I'm running out of time here, but intuition, okay, comes from our right brain, because intuition so often knows things that are sort of outside of time and space, right? Well, the right brain is outside of time and space. So this is where our intuition can come online too, which is perhaps the most important skill we can have today, because we need our intuitions online. We need to be fully empowered human beings. And when we do, listen, nothing stands a chance. We're going to open those portals to the third heaven, and we're going to help our brethren. And it doesn't matter what evil wants to do. It doesn't matter what Satan's trying to do. It doesn't matter what reptilians or dimensional beings or robots or AI, they don't have the creative power. The only thing they can do is try to talk us out of using and developing our creative power. So, don't sit back and listen to this elite idea of, oh, Diddy's so much more creative than me. That's not why Diddy was in that position. It had nothing to do with his creativity. And one thing I learned when I was on the music scene in New York, there's no lack of talent. There are so many talented musicians and artists out there that never get heard, never get pushed to the forefront. So that's another thing that you can do, is seek those guys out. Give them some love. It doesn't even have to be money, right? Seek them out. Give them support. Give them the encouragement. Listen to the message of their song. Use this pure music to fuel your creativity, because it's contagious. That's the final thing I'll say about creativity. It is contagious. When you are around creative people, you will want to create. So I'm sending out those vibes today, and I'm saying, hey man, you are a creative being. That's just the truth. Okay? If you heard nothing else from today, hear that and get out there and start creating.